A grown human body is 70% water. Set against a real fire, it is little more than a piece of wet firewood. And yet, for 2 or 3 centuries, case files across many countries have recorded, here and there, a kind of fire that no one could file away. The reports all say much the same. The chairs untouched, the floor untouched, the person burned through. No source of flame, no one who set it. The fire seems to have started from inside the body itself. These cases have a name: spontaneous human combustion. To this day, there is no accepted explanation. But what if this kind of fire is not always an accident? What if someone trained for decades, for one single day, to set himself alight in front of everyone? Such a man was actually recorded in a book from the early 18th, the scholar Wang Shijin. He wrote him into the Chibei Otan. Outside the city of Nanchang, in a small temple by the river, there lived a monk whose origins no one knew. It was the early years of Kangxi, and there stood a small monastery beside a post road in the prefecture of Nanchang. It was not far from the great river. His stream ran along the foot of its wall, and a stand of tall bamboo hid half the gate from view. One evening, a traveler came asking for lodging. He was enormously tall, and his shoulders were broad enough to block the light in the doorway. His features were deep and severe, and he carried a rolled bundle of bedding on his back. When he spoke, the accent was from the northwest, that is, thousands of miles from Jiangxi, where he now stood. He stayed for some 10 days. By day, he rarely went out. Only at dusk would he walk down to the river and stand there until the light was gone. On the 10th day, he went to the abbot and asked to be ordained. The abbot looked troubled. The man had no known origins, and taking him in might invite trouble. The traveler untied his bundle, took out 100 taels of silver, pushed it across, and said only this:
"The silver is all for the temple. All I ask is 2 bowls of gruel a day, for as long as I stay."
The next day his head was shaved, and only after the ordination did the temple discover that this monk was not like a monk at all. He chanted no sutras, he sat no meditation, he kept none of the daily offices, and never once spoke the name of the Buddha. 2 bowls of gruel a day, he ate, returned to his room, sat down facing the wall, and stayed there the whole day through. The novice who brought the gruel often saw it, the sun moving the bamboo shadow across the window from his left shoulder to his right. All that time he faced the wall and never moved, and at night, often, he did not sleep at all. Someone rising in the night would see his room unlit, and the man sitting upright in the dark, his breathing deep and long, like a breath banked down inside a stove. And then there were his robes. In all 4 seasons, he never opened them, not even in the hottest days of summer, and no one ever saw him break a sweat. In the depth of winter, he wore a single layer and stood out in the snow. On other shoulders, the snow settled and stayed. On this man, the snow was gone in moments. At last, someone in the temple could bear it no longer, and went at midnight to peer through the crack of his window. That night, unusually, he had taken off his upper robe. By the light of a single small oil lamp, he was wiping his arms. On each arm there were several rings of bronze, clamped down hard against the flesh. The skin beneath the edges was pressed into deep old grooves. Grooves like that take 10 or 20 years to form. He took a square of cloth and wiped the rings one by one, slowly and with great care, the way an old soldier cleans his own weapon. The next day, someone worked up the courage to ask. He gave no answer, asked again. He simply raised his eyes and looked, and the one who had asked fell silent on his own. 6 or 7 years passed this way. The temple went from suspecting him, to growing used to him, to very nearly forgetting he was there. What changed everything happened on the river. One evening, he was standing on the bank with several other monks, watching the water, when a passenger boat put into shore and a few men came off it. The moment they looked up and saw him, all of them stopped dead. The one in front rushed forward and bowed deeply, so low that his hands came to the ground. The monks were left staring. Before a man of religion, one presses the palms together, but that was the obeisance you give to a master. He raised a hand to stop it, drew the leader a dozen paces away, and the two of them spoke in low voices on the shore for a long while. His companions watched from a distance. Not a word of it could be heard. All they saw was the monk shaking his head now and then. In the end, the visitor stopped speaking, made another deep obeisance, and the men boarded the boat. Looking back at every step, the boat left that same night. That night he stood by the river until dawn. Back at the temple, someone tried to ask. Again he said nothing. Only, from then on, he sat through more of the nights. Then came the year Wushan. It was the 7th year of Kangxi, and he suddenly did something he had never done before. At dawn he bathed, put on clean robes, and made a full and formal prostration before the Buddha. Then he sought out every monk in the temple, one by one, to take his leave, and he said this:
Tomorrow I shall enter nirvana.
Not one person in the temple believed him. Nirvana was for accomplished masters. This man had not opened a single scroll of scripture in 6 or 7 years, nor sat a single session of meditation. On what grounds would he enter nirvana? Someone laughed in his face. He took no offense. He finished his farewells, went back to his room, and closed the door behind him. The next day, on the open ground before the temple, he climbed a platform, spread out a rush mat, and sat down cross-legged. Word had spread. People from the post road had filled the open ground to watch, most of them there to see a fool. Below the platform there was no wood pile, no one held a torch, and he himself asked for no flame. He closed his eyes. The laughter of the crowd began to die away. How long it lasted, no one could say. Then someone at the front of the crowd cried out from his nostrils. 2 thin threads of smoke were rising. The smoke came faster and faster, and in an instant drew itself into 2 lines of fire. Flame poured out from his nostrils and burned up across his face. This fire burned from the inside out. First, the whole of his face glowed red and translucent. Then the whole man lit up. His robes, of all things, were the last to catch. The flame shot up dozens of feet. Black smoke rolled into the sky. Hundreds of people fell back as one. The heat reached their faces from many paces away, and when a gust came off the river, the whole bamboo grove rattled. And at the very instant the flame reached its height, out of the fire burst a white crane. It came out from the crown of his head, passed through a sky full of black smoke, and not one spark clung to its wings. It was blindingly white. It circled above the smoke and the flame. Once and again, hundreds of faces turned up to watch, and not one person spoke. It climbed higher with every turn, until it was only a white speck, and after a long time it was gone into the clouds. The fire went out. On the platform lay a heap of ash. All that survived the burning were those rings of bronze, still holding the shape of an arm, glowed now around nothing but ash. That is the end of the story. Hundreds saw this fire with their own eyes. At the time, this post in Nanchang was held by Zhou Tigua. He was the deputy judicial commissioner, and he wrote an account of it, turning into a crane, to preserve what happened. Now look again at 3 curious things in this story. First, the fire. The only halfway serious explanation for spontaneous human combustion is called the wick effect. An outside flame sets the clothing alight. The cloth becomes the wick. The body fat becomes the wax, and the whole thing smolders slowly. But this fire had no outside flame. It began in the breath, and it began in front of a crowd. It looks less like an accident than like something set to a schedule. Second, the bronze rings. He wiped them at midnight, and of everything on that platform, they alone came through the fire. What if what they held was not his arms, but the heat itself? 6 or 7 years at the wall to gather it, the rings to hold it back, and that obeisance on the riverbank. Someone come to tell him it was time. Third, the crane. Physics speaks of the transformation of energy. The firewood burns away, but the heat does not vanish. It only changes form. The fire consumed the body, that pile of wet firewood, and hundreds of pairs of eyes saw something leave along with it. What if what burned was only the fuel, and what was sent out was the thing that mattered? In the hand of the scholar Wang Shijin, there was no word for energy. Something had flown out of the fire, white, light, and it never came back. He searched every word he knew, and only one thing looked like that: a crane. Perhaps what flew out of that fire was not a crane at all, but what was it? No one knows. Subscribe to Young Decodes for more untold legends.